I don't think it's an understatement to say that The Lord of the Rings, both the books and the movies, have shaped fantasy as a genre more than any other works. The books remain some of the best-selling in the world, having sold more than 150 million copies in at least 38 languages. J.R.R. Tolkien's work has influenced countless people, myself included. I have a very distinct memory of my introduction to The Lord of the Rings. I don't remember how old I was, but it must have been late elementary or early middle school, because I have another distinct memory of lugging around the omnibus book in the 7th grade as I read it for the first time. I remember sitting in a hotel room one evening with my dad. I couldn't tell you whether my mom or sisters were there as well, channel surfing to find some sort of entertainment before we went to bed. The Return of the King was on one of the channels. That's right, as best as I can remember, my introduction to possibly the most famous fantasy series out there started with catching a few scenes from the third movie as it played on TV. I really only remember two things. I was very confused why the pretty elf lady seemed sick. My dad then explained that the ring that everyone was talking about in the movie was so evil that it was poisoning the world and she would only get better if the ring was destroyed. And I was very impressed by the battering ram shaped like a giant wolf with fire in its jaws. And ever since then, I've been hooked. I don't recall if I read the books before watching the movies, but I know I've done both multiple times over the years. In high school, my friend group's favorite snow day activity was trekking to one of our houses and watching one of the extended editions while eating freshly baked goods. Just as the trilogy has had an effect on the landscape of fantasy books and movies, The Lord of the Rings has influenced D&D as well. Gary Gygax has been very open about the influence of Tolkien's work on the development of the game. Welcome back to the Mightier Pen, where I share narrative tips for the story-driven DM. Because while the pen can be mightier than the sword, it only becomes so with training. I'm Kate, an editor by trade, a writer by hobby, and a DM by default. Today we're stealing from fiction as we talk about the Lord of the Rings trilogy and the structure of quests. Although it predates D&D, Frodo's journey through the series is very D&D coded. He inherits a magical item from an older relative, gotten during a D&D-like quest of his own many years before, only to find out later that it's much more important than anyone thought, and also cursed. Think Vecna's hand or eye meets Lich's phylactery. So, on the advice of a wizard, he goes on a trip to avoid the big bad's henchmen and get the artifact to a council of seasoned adventurers who can decide what to do with it. After meeting an archfey in the woods and gaining a ranger guide, as well as a few well-meaning NPC companions, Frodo gets to the council, only to end up on the quest to destroy the ring because he's accidentally attuned to the thing, and it's just not safe to let anyone else try and fight its thrall. He travels with his new party for a while, which is pretty heavily skewed toward martial characters and has no healers until Aragorn has leveled up some more, but at least they've got a high-level wizard. Unfortunately, the thrall of the ring proves too strong for some of them to resist. Boromir just can't pass his wisdom saves, and unlike the halflings, he doesn't get to reroll natural ones. So Frodo, breaking the cardinal rule of never splitting the party, sets out with his best friend and a creepy guide for the craziest stealth mission of all time. Which, to be fair, is probably for the best. Gimli is definitely wearing heavy armor and would have disadvantage on stealth, and while Pippin does have proficiency in stealth, he never uses it. Many miles, battles, and trials later, the quest comes to an explosive end. On the surface, the main quest of The Lord of the Rings is deceptively simple. Destroy the One Ring. That's really all there is to it. Oh, sure, the details get complicated, and plans are made, executed, changed, and scrapped as the situation calls for it, but in a nutshell, that's the goal of the books. Which brings me rather nicely to my first point. In planning your D&D campaign, it's important to be able to distill the main goal into very simple terms. This will help you make sure that all the things you plan fit into that vision. The goal will naturally be much more complex and encompass many sub-goals, but having that clarity in mind will help you decide, when considering a course of action or a possible side quest or plot line, whether it advances your or your player's quest line. This isn't necessarily something that you'll share with your players, especially not upfront. This simplified goal is more for you, to make sure that you have a unified idea of what the story arc will be. So don't worry about spoiling any secrets you might be keeping from your players. You also don't need to start with the end goal quest. It's more about bringing different story threads together. In The Lord of the Rings, Frodo leaves home not to destroy the ring, but to keep it safely out of the hands of evil and take it to people who will know what to do with it. It was only when he'd completed that task that he signed up for the greater one. Let your goal evolve as your players do, either as they and their adversaries grow more powerful, or as the players contribute their own ideas and backstories to the game. In writing and storytelling, plot comes down to two basic questions. What does the main character want, and what's stopping them from getting it? Frodo, as I said, wants to destroy the ring. However, he faces many obstacles on that path. The vast distance between where he is and the only place the ring can be destroyed is filled with the normal hazards and monsters that travelers in fantasy worlds face. There's also the Nazgul, the aforementioned henchmen of the big bad, who are drawn to the ring and are trying to track down Frodo and his friends. The Uruk-hai, the henchmen of a secondary bad guy, Saruman, are also tracking the party. And the ring is somewhat sentient and wants to return to its maker, so it is constantly trying to be found, either by the henchmen or somebody who won't be trying to destroy it. After you identify the main quest, start on point 2 by breaking it down into steps and individual obstacles for each one. Destroy the one ring is all very well and good, but how exactly does one go about doing that? Well, as it happens, the ring can only be destroyed in one particular place, so step 1 is getting to Mordor without getting caught. Once Frodo gets to Mordor, the front gate is heavily watched, so he has to pivot and find a back way in. It turns out there is a secret entrance, but whoops, there's a giant spider there too! Once that creature is taken care of, there are hordes of the enemy's army to evade. At the mountain, there's a final fight with both the ring and someone else who's after it, finally leading to its destruction. An important note: obstacles shouldn't be designed to fully stop your players, but to delay them or make them turn in a different direction. That brings me to point number 3. Not every step of progress needs to be forward. Frodo and Sam took a very direct route to Mordor, but the rest of the party got diverted. Still, those diversions ended up being necessary to their success. If not for Merry and Pippin, Sauron's ally Saruman would have kept the kingdoms of men at war and divided, each focusing on their own lands and troubles. Without the combined strength of Gondor and Rohan, Frodo likely would have been caught by orcs. Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas all worked toward the same goal as Merry and Pippin, and Gandalf as well, but from another route, quite literally, as they embarked on the paths of the dead. Speaking of the paths of the dead, let's move on to point 4. Personal quests can, and in my opinion should, tie into the larger plot-related quest. Aragorn has a hidden birthright as the heir to the throne of Gondor. His character arc centers around his fears of repeating the past and growing enough confidence in himself to claim the throne and become the king. At first, it doesn't seem to tie into the main quest of destroying the ring until you learn that his ancestor's great failing was falling to the ring's thrall and not destroying it when he had the chance. Then his own struggles to resist it gain a lot of meaning. In choosing the path to kinghood, Aragorn unites the kingdoms of men behind a common cause, fighting Sauron, which enables Frodo to destroy the ring. The final point to consider when building a quest is what failure means. One of the best pieces of DM advice I've ever gotten, and one that I still have to constantly remind myself to heed, is that if you need something to happen, you shouldn't leave it up to a dice roll. It's hard, I'm the first to admit that. There's nothing like that moment of tension around a high-stakes roll. Everyone at the table waiting with bated breath to see what number the die shows, hoping to succeed and dreading what failure might mean. But when it comes down to the things that propel the story, if you leave it up to chance, it will eventually fail. Frodo, standing on the precipice in Mount Doom, looking at the pool of lava below, wasn't able to throw the ring in. 3 whole books led up to that moment, the single goal of all the forces of good, and he essentially failed his role. But his failure didn't mean the end of the quest. That's why I mentioned earlier that obstacles shouldn't be designed to stop the players, but to detain, delay, or derail them. Because unless you want to take away those big moments of nervously rolling the dice, which we all love so much, there is always the chance the PCs will fail. So have an idea of what it might mean if they do. If they fail a roll, consider the Monster of the Week system's partial success with a cost mechanic. It's one I've adopted in situations where I want a specific thing to happen and I want the players to have the agency to try different things or roll for something, but the dice just don't agree. I don't want to punish my players or cripple the story, so I still give them the secret or allow them to progress, but I also make sure there's a cost or punishment to go with it. The players use the hidden entrance, but make enough noise to draw attention as they do. They convince someone to tell them the secret they're trying to uncover, but now they owe that person a significant favor. The ring is destroyed, but Frodo loses a finger in the process. So, let's run through those 5 points again. 1. Simplify the main goal. 2. Break the goal down into steps and create obstacles for each one. 3. Not every step needs to be forward. 4. Personal quests can further the main quest. And 5. Failure shouldn't be the end of the quest. How do you approach developing a quest? Share it in the comments below. I'm Kate, and this has been the Mightier Pen. Keep honing those storytelling skills, and may your quests always be epic.